to the InnerVerse. It's an illusion.
Welcome to the One Within All, to another episode of InnerVerse. I'm your host, Chance, coming at you from a paradisical Midwest afternoon and ready for another paradigm-challenging chat. Among the many myths of modern scientism that we regularly rebuke around here is the notion of a chaotic and dead universe. That we live in a world that is mostly composed of inert and lifeless matter that just so happens to take on its various forms because of the randomized conditions of ancient stars, which forged the elements of our existence in much the same way a tornado hitting a junkyard frequently assembles a Boeing 747. Joking aside, though, there's a significant problem with the mainstream worldview that our world is simply a big old rock, which just so happened to generate life in some long-forgotten puddle of primordial ooze. According to the scientific Tower of Babel, atoms become molecules, which somehow become cellular organisms, which somehow, because larger and more complex life forms are going to emerge from that, means your mega-great-granddad's a monkey, and that's why we have viruses. So get in line for your next pharmaceutical intervention and hurry up and wait for the promised Star Wars future that you can blast off into a void of space to find another world to infect with the disease of humanity, because this one's allegedly terminal. But if the classical inversion of satanic scientific systems can be applied to the evolutionary story, then this godless creation myth might just be upside down and bass-ackwards. And if that's the case, what's it all mean? The big what if here is the possibility that instead of ascending from microbe to mega-fauna, what if life has descended from gigantic forms down to our modern frame of size reference? And what if the biggest life form of all is the Earth itself, with all the ramifications that such a possibility entails? Most notably, that all matter is biological, and that life, existence, and material are synonymous phenomena. These are the threads that today's guest has been pulling on. At this point, he's got a mountain-sized ball of yarn. Mike Wilkerson is the man behind the Stellium7 YouTube channel and a bona fide titanologist with theories you've got to see to believe. Over the last 5+ years, Mike's been revealing the evidence hidden in plain sight that supports his conjecture that Spain's Montgo massif, in his very own proverbial backyard, appears to be the petrified remains of a pachyderm so massive that in comparison a woolly mammoth looks like an ant. It may sound like a stretch to our modern sensibilities, but I invite you all to suspend disbelief and engage some imagination as we explore Mike's Bio-Geology research. Because even if you come away deciding that Montgo is just another pile of dead rocks, what you'll learn about petrification and the universality and eternality of life on this realm will change the way you look at stones forever. If you dig this chat, make sure you've subbed to Stellium7 on YouTube so you can see the highly visual evidence for yourself, and check the show notes for links to all that and the ways you can support InnerVerse. So with that, let's rock and roll. Everyone, please welcome the titanic tree searcher and pioneer of petrification investigation, the great Mike Wilkerson, aka Stellium7. Welcome to InnerVerse, man. It's great to finally speak with you.
Hi, everybody. Oh, wonderful to be here. Thanks for the invite, Chance. I've been enjoying your podcast off and on for a long time now. So fun to actually be here and talk with you. And yeah, tree searcher. I like that.
Got to pull out all the pun stops for the introduction, get everyone fired up. But yeah, it's hard to even encapsulate the research that you do. It's literally massive in scope and breadth. But maybe you can give my audience who's not familiar with your work a walkthrough of your story, how you became the Titan guy.
Well, I'll try and do it in a short way. I got a comment just yesterday after an interview that I posted on my channel. Someone was like, "We've heard your story 1,000 times. Don't talk so much about yourself." So, but unfortunately, this journey is kind of just my own exploration of reality and the things that came along as I started to ask unconventional questions. And it began really with the idea, well, first of all, exploring cosmology. This is about 10 years ago, the idea that maybe the Earth isn't what we thought. And that led to all sorts of other questions, never ending. And along the way, I came across this idea that maybe geology wasn't what we thought either, and that things might have come about much more quickly than we were taught. And that was really how it began. I just started to look at stones differently. I often would see rock formations and puzzle over how they could have come about. And I knew the basics of what geology calls Petra-Genesis and how we're told that they come about. And I'd see things that just didn't make any sense. And I figured, well, the geologists have it all figured out. And I was never particularly interested in rocks. I thought that geology and archaeology were just about the most boring subjects that you could focus on, and was very interested in science fiction and space and exploring the stars and getting us off of this rock before we got hit by an asteroid and all that sort of stuff. So it never really occurred to me that there was much of importance to still find out here.
It turns out with everything being upside down, like I alluded to in the intro, that there's infinite potential of stuff to find out. And I've heard some of your interviews as I was preparing for this show, including a really great one that you did with our buddy Topher on biocharisma about a year ago. Recommend people check that out. Always interesting to see the type of stories that come out of Topher with each different guest. That guy's full of it.
Oh man, he's so full of it, that guy.
We love him.
Awesome. I got the chance to meet him in person in Mexico. I was a speaker at Anarchapulco in February, and he was there with his family, but unfortunately got Montezuma's revenge, and he was laid up for a while with stomach issues and had his family visiting. So we didn't get a chance to hang out and talk nearly as much as I had hoped we would, because I'd already had the interview with him, and we have so many overlapping interests, and he's been a huge proponent of my work and shouted me out many times in different interviews that he's done. So yeah,
he's
I love
great
Topher,
like that.
and he's such a wealth of knowledge and can speak on just about any subject under the sun. So shout out to Topher. Hey.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, it's like we're returning the favor because he shouts us out all the time. What a good dude. And one of the things I heard you mention in that was you actually had a background studying philosophy, or is that true?
Yeah, I started in college as a philosophy major, and originally that was the plan. And then when I moved to Italy as an exchange student in '97, and I was just not interested in studying the classic philosophy because I was so interested in quantum physics and how this looped back around and seemed to be confirming a lot of the things that the ancient mystics of the Far East were telling us, thousands of years ago. So when I got there and saw what the curriculum was for the philosophy courses, I just thought, oh man, I've got to study Aristotle and Plato. And I didn't understand that was really where I should have been going with a lot of my learning in order to learn how to think and how to reason logically. Instead, I was interested in these esoteric topics and how they tied into the new science and that sort of thing. So along the way, I realized that if I switched my major to Italian, I could study anything I wanted while I was there, because I was matriculated into an Italian university with Italian professors. And so switching to an Italian cultural studies major was about the closest to a classics degree that I could get, where I could just study a lot of different subjects, because I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do with my life. I was there. I turned 30 while I was in Italy. So I was slow to get my bachelor's. I had to put myself through school as a waiter. And so switching to Italian gave me more freedom, and so I got some philosophy, but I didn't really go down that route fully. And I wish I had now when I look back on it, because there's so much to glean from the ancient thinkers.
It's crazy what the wrong teacher can do to inform your perspective on a subject. I took a philosophy course, just one, in college. And the old biddy that taught that class, very Southern, she's a sweet lady, but I don't think that she really cared much about philosophy. I think she was just filling a role at the community college. And she couldn't say a sentence without using the words virtually, literally, and practically in the same sentence, every sentence. It was really wild, but it made my take on philosophy seem like it was really boring. And that's the way it's taught, that you're just supposed to memorize and regurgitate which thinker said what. And I've been actually reading a book about
dates.
Right. I've been reading a book recently about how to extract the esoteric meaning out of philosophical writing, and how, and like the different ways that things can be concealed or hidden, the different strategies and techniques that are employed by esoteric writers, which it turns out the majority of the Western canonical literature contains esoteric elements, one or another. And in reading that book, I didn't realize that the mainstream academic philosophy lens was that esotericism is a myth, which is crazy. That's what they'll teach you if you went further in the philosophy department, that no, it's all just the surface level meaning. It's all a myth. But why I'm even bringing up philosophy and esotericism is that many cosmogonies, which are frequently handed down to us through the writings of philosophers, retell a origin story of the earth, that a god constructed the heavens and the earth out of the body of a primordial monstrous goddess. And that seemed like, I'm happy to chalk that up to allegory, but going forward into your work, it's starting to cause me to scratch my head and think, well, what if, maybe you can get into that.
Yeah, well, I was a big fan of the theory about the holographic universe. I read a book by, I think it was Talbot, discussing that, and this idea that things are fractal. I was really enamored of fractals, as soon as I heard about them. I don't know how many years ago that was. And just this infinite regression of, the mathematical equations and how you can go in infinitely and out infinitely. And I had a feeling that was how the universe was constructed as well. And I was trying to fit that into a heliocentric Big Bang cosmological model, but I just figured, okay, well, maybe even the Big Bang, is just one of many little bangs that happen all throughout the universe. And, but you're absolutely right about this idea of one bad teacher. I work as a chiropractor here in Spain where I live, and I became a chiropractor. I turned 40 shortly after graduating from chiropractic college. It was I had many other chapters to my life before going into chiropractic. And I had a massage teacher who was actually a fantastic teacher. And I learned many, many great techniques. And I studied kinesiology and different things that had to do with acupuncture and energy medicine in general. This is back in my 20s, but he had a lot of misconceptions about chiropractic. And so he scared me away from the entire profession. My mom was trying to push me in that direction from the time I was in my 20s, because she had a good friend who was a chiropractor. And he's like, you should do this. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. No way. But I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because my journey is very unique because I didn't go into chiropractic in my 20s. But one teacher can throw you off course dramatically. And I think one of the main techniques that's used to throw us off the truth is to bore us to death and make really, really interesting things as uninteresting as possible. Like, how many children would be thrilled about mathematics if they learned about sacred geometry and learned that it was manifesting in every aspect of reality, and that, look, that flower over there is manifesting incredible geometry and mathematics. And this is why, instead it's algebra, and you're trying to figure out why the hell you need to figure out what X and Y are. Why? It's, how practical is that? So it's really fun to awaken to different ways in which we've been bamboozled and start to re-explore reality. And that's that's been my last 10 years, really.
I once read somewhere or heard somebody say that the real fall of man was when numbers became purely quantitative and lost any semblance of quality to the numbers. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you could kind of apply that to all of the material sciences as well, that they became purely quantitative, and the knowledge that stones that are in the color resonance of blue are going to have some kind of influence on your throat capacities, and all the way up and down the chain of energy centers and cymatics. And there's so much more to it. I think you're right that kids would love math if maybe we taught them quality before quantity, quality over quantity. That's what they always say. And you bring up the Big Bang. That's just a reiteration in a sort of non-spiritualized sense of a cosmic egg, which was given to us by a Catholic priest who I think was trying to scientificize the notion of the mythological creation story. So we can't really, I bring this up frequently, but we can't really get ourselves out of this monomyth framework of the cataclysm cycle, the renewal, the destruction and regeneration of the world. And that's why I'm so curious about, the earth itself being alive, or about these rocks being themselves the remnants of biological material. Maybe you can tell us about Petra-Genesis. Let's maybe break into that topic.
Sure. Well, the mainstream story of Petra-Genesis is, ultimately all of the rock that we see in one way or another, it was alive at one time, even in the mainstream geological model. Apart from volcanic, you've got the magma coming up and pushing up and then coming out of the volcanoes. We can witness that happening. Even volcanoes are a conundrum as far as what they are and what they might have been.
So let me just highlight that all rock was once alive, and that's in the mainstream model, except igneous rock.
Exactly. So you've got
that
your
itself
sediment
is not what most people would think. Most people don't even have that idea.
Right. They get us with the timelines. The geological timelines are justifying the heliocentric timelines. So they're telling us the Earth, the universe is like 16 billion years old, and they know, it happened on a Tuesday, a particular year, because they can use their telescopes to see that everything is expanding away, and they can calculate when it was all at one particular point. And so that's how they, and they're using redshift and different techniques to determine how fast things are moving and how old they were and that sort of thing. Which in itself is their attempt to explain away the fact that everything from our perspective in the cosmos appears to be redshifted away from us, as if we were the center. Yeah, it's funny.
So they have to come up with this expanding universe theory to solve that, because in their own words, many of the scientists' own words, it's abhorrent to entertain the idea that we could be special or the center. Like they can't stand that idea, which is weird to me. I'm stoked about that idea.
Yeah. So back to your question. So then they tell us the Earth is something like 4.6 billion years old. So all of those theories tie together, and they justify one another. So when it comes to biology being geology, they're telling us that it is, but they're telling us over a time span of hundreds of millions of years. So the way it works is trees, animal life, plant life die, they decompose, and then they're pressed because new layers are coming on top of that. And that happens under the seafloor, where you have all that weight of the water that's pressing even more. And that gives rise to these sedimentary layers that we can see, where you've got these lines, and then as that compresses even more, that pressure starts to cause these different materials to melt, and that's what we call metamorphic rock. So when you see rock that looks biological, or it's got swirls in it, almost looks like some sliced meat, they're saying that that's all of this plant life and animal life that's compressed for hundreds of millions of years. And then what happens is there are all these tectonic plates that are moving around, and they're shifting, and they eventually collide, and they create mountains. And so we can see those sedimentary layers going in different angles, and and eventually those bits and pieces of the layers break off, and then they roll around and they get smoothed out, and that's how we get all of these different kinds of stones. So basically, that's the cycle of petrogenesis. You have the igneous, which we talked about, the magma coming up, and that's your volcanic rock. You can witness that occurring. You can see it cool and harden, and we know what that stone looks like. And then you have sedimentary, and then you have metamorphic. So those are the mainstream narratives when it comes to how stones are formed. Some of that stuff is really easy to debunk. Like, for example, when Mount St. Helens erupted back in the 80s, there are actual flows that occurred in a space of hours where you can see all of the sedimentary layering and even the micro layering that they normally attribute to this dying, this seasonal dying that happens. That you're going to get these super fine layers. Well, that happened in a matter of hours in certain places in where Mount St. Helens is. And so geologists have examined that. And that to me it's just like, there's so many mainstream scientists that have actually debunked cornerstones of the geological narrative, but it never seems to unravel the whole narrative.
That's how it is with all the science. It doesn't seem to matter how many black swans you demonstrate. They're like, they just hang on, cling to their tenures and their established theories and whatnot. So we're preaching to the choir about that. But that to me was something I did not know, that rocks are primarily formed out of biological materials, even in the mainstream. So when you move on to the Mike Wilkerson lens, it's not even that crazy, other than having to swallow the notion that there were mega-fauna and mega-flora even bigger than what our textbooks tell us about the so-called dinosaurs, of which actually there's lots of problems with dinosaur fossils, oddly enough. But I wanted to maybe see where you're at in terms of your own theory or hypothesis about why things were so big and why things are not so big now. Like what's the descent from these giant creatures to our
well they tell us dinosaurs existed, and these are just giant lizards basically. And I think it's interesting that pretty much all of the ancient societies around the world, they had their myths of dragons. So it might be that they're just obfuscating the truth of dragons, giant reptiles, and calling it dinosaurs. But they could only reach a certain size before they would collapse under their own weight. This is the mainstream model. So they tell us that titanic beings couldn't have existed because the gravitational pull would be so great, because as you increase the size of something, you're increasing the volume dramatically. Like if you have a sphere and you double the diameter of a sphere, you've increased the volume by 8 times, right? Just by doubling the diameter. So if you're talking about gravity, as in the official model, and you increase the size of something, then it's going to have so much mass that it would just break its own bones and collapse under its own weight. That's the mainstream reason for why these creatures couldn't have existed. And yet in the mainstream model, they tell us that gigantism was definitely a thing. They talk about 5 great cataclysms that killed most of the life on Earth. And this is part of the geological narrative. You got the trilobite times, and you have these sedimentary layer stories about how old things are, and the further down you go, the older they get. And so you got the Pleistocene, and you got the Jurassic, and you have all these names for these different eras. And so there are 5 different times, according to the mainstream model, that everything just got annihilated. And so when you're looking at the dinosaurs, they're telling us that was a comet strike. But even in back in the dinosaur time, they're telling us that dragonflies could reach up to 1 meter in size. Well, if a dragonfly is 1 meter, how big is a bear? How big is an elephant? So this question of how big could things get, they're saying it depends on gravity. But if you dig into gravity, you find out that gravity is not all it was we were told it was either. And the electrostatic force is something like it's got 30 zeros after it, stronger than the strong force of gravity. That's like you rub a balloon, it sticks to your head. That's the electrostatic force. And there's definitely an electrostatic charge that seems to cause things to go to the earth and go down. So you look at density and buoyancy, and then you look at electrostatics, and you're like, do we even need gravity to explain what we experience here and why things go down? And if you don't have gravity as they tell us, then those reasons for why we couldn't have had gigantic trees and gigantic creatures, those reasons are thrown out. And the way I got onto all these subjects in the first place is encapsulated very nicely by that picture just behind you to your right, of the cosmic egg, and digging into Earth shape and what are we really in or on. And once you get to the point where you understand that the supposed proof and evidence for the heliocentric model and space and the Earth being what they told us it is really flimsy, and the deeper you dig, the less you find when it comes to actual evidence for those claims, then I think if you got an open mind, you realize, I don't know what the hell I'm on. I don't know how big it is. Does it go out? Is it an infinite plane? Is it hollow? Is it concave? There are lots of possibilities, and I'm not attached to any one of them particularly. I don't identify as a flat earther. If anything, I think we're inside of a toroid. That seems to be the universal shape that reappears in so many different ways. So,
and there's no curvature. So that's a thing.
Yeah. It's like we see too far, and there's so many problems with it. And so when I realized that it could be really, really, really big, and there's no problem with that, and there's old maps that appear to show outer rings and all kinds of additional continents that we are not told about, and whether that's fabricated or real, I don't know. But as I started to come across, there was a video that came out like 8 years ago called "No Forests on Flat Earth" that was looking at the whole tree stump remnants around the world. That there's so many different plateaus that appear to look identical to tree. And there's a lot of debate, even in the alternative communities, about whether those are trees or what they were. What they don't seem to be is what we're told. Like if you consider Devil's Tower as this thing that looks exactly like a tree stump, well, the way they're told that they tell us that that's formed, they're basically like four main theories, but they're all based on the same idea that you have volcanic flow that's coming upward and that's creating pressure. And then there's a rapid cooling, and that rapid cooling, the lava causes this expansion that just magically turns all of that lava into honeycomb columns of basalt. That's the official story. And then there are different, nuances in those theories about how that comes about. But is that really how lava works? We can't find any examples of that actually occurring in real time, even though we still have active volcanoes. And you could argue, well, we don't have the rapid cooling that came with, the sudden ice age that came in and wiped out all the mammoths and immediately flash froze them. Like you can find in Siberia, they're unearthing or unicing mammoths that the flesh is still preserved to the point where they can eat the meat. So clearly some kind of flash freezing occurred along with God knows what else. There's all kinds of traces of massive cataclysm across the realm. And whether it was fire and volcanic activity, the whole ring of fire going off at once, that would spew up a lot of ash that could drop temperatures, that could cause an ice age. You've got plasma scarring all over the earth, these Lichtenberg figures that look like they're fractal. And this is like when lightning strikes, it can create Lichtenberg figures. It can do it in sand and create these fractals of sand that literally will come up off of the beach. And it's this, it looks like tree branches bifurcating into ever smaller branches. So there's so many different things that you can look at that if you just look at them from another context, they start to make a lot more sense.
The Lichtenberg figure, that's another word for what we often call around here the dendritic pattern. that you see it in the blood veins of your body, in the way that rivers branch off into tributaries and streams, in the lightning strikes, of course, in the way that trees themselves grow branches and limbs. It's pretty much a ubiquitous pattern in the realm, which is itself.
And in our biology as well, when we look at how blood vessels and nerves and the fractal aspects of the fascial network, everything seems to follow that pattern. It's electrical ultimately.
Yeah. And so even when you're looking at, say, the Grand Canyon as a giant plasma scarring Lichtenberg figure,
the biggest,
the biggest. Yeah. I wonder if another alternate possibility is blood vessels and veins of a titanic super mega giant titan, or of whatever this realm itself might be as a body.
Or a world tree. It doesn't have to be a being. It can be, a tree is a being also, but it doesn't have to be a mammal or something like, or a humanoid.
Or even a type of life form that we would recognize.
Yeah. Yeah. So like root structures of a giant tree, for example. I've done videos examining not just the stumps, but all of the other evidence in favor of the trees. And a lot of people get stuck on the stumps and they, argue back and forth about whether or not those are really stumps or something else. But what I've said in a lot of my videos is that's a data point, but it's not the best evidence in favor of the trees. There's way better evidence than that. That's completely conclusive in my mind and self-evident. And I've had the opportunity to tour recently the Badlands of South Dakota with a guy named Mike, who's got a channel called Hangman 1128. And he's, as long as I've been talking about titans and biogeology, he's been talking about the biblical trees and showing what I consider to be unequivocal evidence that they were real, and they were on a size that's unfathomable. Really, we're talking miles wide at the base. And how high would that stretch? And how is that possible? Well, if we live in something like what's behind you, then miles wide would be possible, because how high up could it stretch? If there's a firmament, where is it? How big is it? I don't know. But we have volcanoes that are spewing stuff up. And if you look at the lava tubes, they look very much like root structures. There's a channel called the Action Adventure Twins. These guys, I don't think they're really questioning Earth shape and that sort of stuff. They seem kind of mainstream to me, but they're going down, spelunking into things that dive. They're going down 1,000 feet and then going down winding channels and then going down another 500 or 600 feet, and it looks identical to what you would expect to find for the water channels or the flow of sap through giant trees. It's wild.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. We got to come back to the trees. But while we're still talking about the shrinking of gigantic life forms down to our size, have you seen any evidence or anything to support the possibility that the density composition of the atmosphere could have been different? Because when you really think about what the air is, we're underwater right now. This is just water that's at a lighter density than the water that we would call the ocean. And in fact, like saltwater and freshwater are different density levels too. You're much more buoyant in saltwater. And you've probably seen, I hope you've seen, if not, then go check it out because it'll blow your mind. But the shores of the ocean that are under the ocean. Do you know what I'm talking about? So yes. They've found places under this on the seafloor where there's a beach and there's a denser water that is rippling separate
to the shore.
Yeah, there's a shore under the ocean. So for all we know, there's density levels of scale that go up and down over and over again. And what we call the firmament could just be a density shift, similar to trying to surface out of the water for a fish, that they can't really go up there. And
there was a submarine that tried to descend into it and basically just bounced off of it because it was too dense for the submarine to penetrate. Yeah, that gets into the question of primary water and what the water is like deep in the earth, which also ties into petrification as well. There's a lake called Lake Natron where creatures fall in and they petrify because it's such I always get them mixed up, but the water is incredibly base. It's alkaline water, and the only thing that can survive these waters are flamingos, and they're not submerging themselves, but they can walk around in these waters. Everything else that falls in dies, and it turns hard.
That's probably where the Egyptians got the idea for mummification, because they use natron in that. And I heard you and Topher talking about natron being
Topher talks about that for geopolymer as well.
Yeah, it's an ingredient for geopolymer.
Yeah, and there's a cave called Mother Shipton's Cave in the UK where people go and they'll hang different objects from rope, and then the water will trickle down the rope and on around the object. And within months, these things are already hardening and turning to stone. And it's just because of the high mineral content waters. So how do we get on the subject of the water below this? You asked something else before you mentioned about the lake shore.
Well, it is a reasonable idea that gigantic titanic life forms would not do well in our environment, because whether you call it gravity or you call it density, it's just going to be like, for one, the caloric requirement of being that huge is absurd to imagine. And for two, weight does increase geometrically.
Well, and the question is, did they even have to eat? If you have, some people refer to it as a vapor canopy, a time period where the oxygen levels were far more concentrated. That seems to also be confirmed by mainstream science, where they get these pockets and they can look back in time and look at the qualities of things from different core samples and that sort of thing. So if you increase the CO2 levels, you get massive growth in life. So I think we're the CO2 we're the carbon they want to reduce. People grow plants. There's experiment that was done with a room that was pressurized. So if you just increase the oxygen concentration and pressurize it, I'm not sure about the CO2, what they're doing with that, but there's a guy that took a cherry tomato plant, and it was producing tens of thousands of tomatoes that were very large. And it was a cherry tomato plant, and that was just done with increasing the pressure. So if we are in an enclosure, and it seems so because we have atmospheric pressure, how do you have that without some kind of a barrier?
Wait, so the tomatoes were getting bigger. The tomatoes getting bigger with higher pressure or lower pressure?
Higher pressure.
Higher pressure is making them okay, and then that would also be kind of a
gigantism in plant life by increasing pressure.
Well, that then supports the possibility possibility of there being, like, when I say different density level, well, higher density in the reason you float in water is because water is much higher density than what we call air. But if the air was higher density, that's also more pressure. You know that just by going underwater, they call that water pressure. You get the bends, all that. So it starts to become an interesting possibility that there were different pressure levels, different density levels in the atmosphere at a certain point. And
that gets back to what I alluded to, which is, was it possible that there was a time where creatures didn't even need to eat to sustain themselves? They were just breathing or taking in, the rays of whatever was there beaming into them. And for people who've gone deep into the whole Tartarian subject, all of the ancient architecture, there's this conundrum of like, where are all the bathrooms? And what if people weren't eating? It's just something, it's fun to ponder. I don't have any, firm answers to any of that, but
they were just so fancy that
questions.
They were so fancy that they only went in special outdoor places. Who knows? But I'll try to summarize this quickly so that I'm not taking up all the time. But there's a theory that I like to entertain about the Earth and the cosmic egg that essentially focuses on the fact that if there's really not a South Pole and North Pole, there's just the magnetic north, and that means that there's an actual center to this plane, then the North Pole, or what we call the North Pole, the center of the plane, would be akin to like a spinal column of the cosmos. And we know that on our spine, that's
Axis Mundi.
Axis Mundi, exactly. This on our spine, the energy of our whole body is carried up and down our spine. That's like that's the highest concentration of energy of our body. So if that's the case for the Earth, and then what if there's like what if the catastrophism that we observe has something to do with the Earth itself growing? And this is where it gets interesting with the flat Earth cosmic egg model, because like when we look at Venus, for example, Venus does the same type of phasing phenomenon that the moon does, goes crescent, waxing, waning.
I've heard that, but I've never seen it confirmed. That's something I'd like to.
That's mainstream confirmed. Yeah, that's a real
Is
thing.
that a mainstream? That Venus has phases like the moon does.
Yeah, and when you even look at the names of the wandering luminaries we call planets, all of those are names that were once names of the sun. So if we just took that and run with it and say those things actually were the sun. People like to say Saturn used to be the sun. Well, it's true that the ancients did refer to the sun by that name of Saturn or Kronos before the Greeks actually used to call what we call Saturn, that planet, Phano. But what if there's a thing that goes on where at the center of the realm in this high energy, because if you're right by the spine of the world, it's going to be really energetically dense, so maybe that's the place where things get super big, and maybe you don't even need to eat there. Maybe the whole life and death concept doesn't exist in the same way, because like Mercury would be the luminary of that part of our world, like an inner ring. And it's
I've heard
potentially a constant
as the black sun that actually exists below the North Pole. You've got the whole Rupus nigra, the world tree, the magnetic mountain that's at the center. It's spoken of in the Smoky God as well.
Oh yeah. Go listen to that audiobook. You don't have to even read it.
That's great. Yeah. The audiobook is wonderful. I've heard it a couple times now. So there are all these old maps with the 4-continent center there, and then Rupus nigra in the middle. And maybe that was the world tree and it was cut down, or maybe it's still there and
who's cutting down world trees? That sounds like conspiratard stuff, but but what if like the middle luminary, which is a perpetual morning or evening, twilight
singularity
state, there's no night or day. It's just perpetual light. What if at certain intervals of time, the earth grows like literally new land? I think that it could be an electrolysis event that causes this. And that middle luminary actually divides into twins, the sun and the moon. And each time that this happens, the growing of outward from the center pushes things out further from the middle. And the further out from the middle you get, the smaller you get.
Further from source.
The further from source, right? Because you just think of it like philosophically, you have the one divides into two, the two divide into 4, into 8. And with each level of division, there's also less of the pie, so to speak, or more multiplicity. Things could be smaller. I think that there could be something like that going on where we like the remnants of stuff we see might be from a time when the land that we're currently on was actually more in the middle before it gets pushed out by a growing Earth phenomenon. And the sun, that like Saturn and Jupiter are a sun and moon of a further out ring, that there's actually like a concentric
Martin
ring.
Kenny talked about that many years ago. He came out with several videos about the cosmic egg.
Yeah, I loved that stuff. It was too bad he wound up being crazy. But like that stuff still, the overall theory still really tickles my fancy.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting take on things that I haven't like adopted it as a belief, but it's definitely there as one of the things that I think could be happening is that there is some, just the central source is dividing, like you say, and expanding outward. And the further you get from that center, the denser things are, less energetic because it's further from source. And I was thinking about the tree, if you think of bark, the reverse of bark is crab. It just occurred to me when you were talking, and like, what is a crab? It's got this hard external shell, an exoskeleton, and it's soft on the inside. It's the opposite of what we are. And so they're fun things to ponder. And I have no problem incorporating those ideas into my cosmological view. When we think about the creation of the universe in general, small subject, the Bible says that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters and then spoke creation into existence. Right? You've got the first, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then God's moved upon the waters. And that's how light is formed. Sound precedes light. We know that from sonoluminescence. And that, if you think about cymatics in general, this vibration coming from a speaker that's vibrating water, it creates all these incredibly complex geometric patterns. And you have this oscillation of the sound. And so if you think of this creation as just one word of God, and as that expands outward, it's going to oscillate while it exists, and then there's the space between the notes, right? That's creates the music. And so if it's just a cymatic utterance, then that's essentially what the star in a jar is. Sonoluminescence, sound creating luminescence and light. So I think we're in something like that. And I'm sure you're familiar with the star in the jar. For those who might not be, there's a spherical experiment where they have a spherical glass container and they hit it with sound frequencies. And what that does is it causes the gases that are diffused throughout the fluid to coalesce into the center of this object. And then it forms bubbles that expand to a certain point, can't expand any further, and then they collapse. And at the moment that they collapse, they give off a flash of light. And so that's happening thousands of times per second in this experiment. And when you're looking at that, it looks identical to what they're seeing with the P900 and P1000s when they're pointing them at the stars. You're seeing cymatic patterns in the stars that shouldn't be there if they're just random, suns that are sending us light from hundreds of millions of light years away. We're seeing concentric rings. We're seeing all kinds of geometric patterns, and they seem to be oscillating and expanding. And they seem to also be underwater. You get this kind of shimmer that like if you're looking at the shadows in a pool. So I think that's we're in something like that. That's my best guess is that we're in a toroidal oscillating cymatic field. And at the center of that would be the singularity that's powering the whole thing.
I'm into it, man. It's just fun to be in the I don't know position and spitball all the possibilities. It's magical. When you talk about the star in the jar, it makes me think of piezoelectricity too, and how you can light up an entire bathroom if you fill up a bathtub, turn out the lights, and start scraping quartz together underwater. So
I'll tell a fun story. I just gave a talk it was called Rebel Health at Librepulco in Serbia. I was invited to that last month. And I spoke a lot about the Rockefeller takeover of medicine and chiropractic history and a lot of different things. And I brought up sonoluminescence because it's very, very intimately related to the chiropractic adjustment. So every time a chiropractor adjusts the spine and you get that popping noise, one of the reasons I didn't become a chiropractor 15 years earlier is because my massage teacher convinced the people in the class that popping noise is bone on bone that's making that noise. And he said, if you keep getting adjusted over and over again over a long period of time, eventually it's going to wear out the bones. So the spine will no longer hold its proper position, which is absolute bogus. The guy did not understand how joints work. But the sound doesn't come from bone at all. It's sonoluminescence. So the way it works is if you extend a joint like a finger, like I just popped, and you separate it, you're creating a vacuum, and that vacuum is pulling gas. Sound familiar? Which is diffused through the fluid. It's pulling it out, and what's happening is it's forming a gas bubble that expands to a certain point, can't expand beyond that point, and then it collapses. And it gives off a flash of light when that happens. So this was theorized for a long time, and now they've actually proven it. And I showed little video clips in my presentation of them using functional MRI and actually adjusting a finger joint in people. And you can actually see as it comes out it reaches a certain point, and then that pop occurs. And at the exact moment the pop occurs, you can see on the MRI a flash of light. So every time a chiropractor is adjusting, they're actually creating light in the body. They're restoring movement in a joint that has aberrant movement and creating sonoluminescence. Like, how cool is that? I do this for a living.
I know my wife's watching right now, so, she's kind of anti-popping. Maybe this will change her mind about it. Next time I'm cracking my knuckles, I'll just be I'm sonoluminescing. I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, and they also say that it causes arthritis if you do it over and over, but the opposite is true. A joint that is rigid because of muscle tension all around the joint, that's going to lead to arthrosis, because the lack of movement means less blood flow. You've got the joint is not being used in its full range of motion. So joints that are not, use it or lose it is the guiding principle of the body, right? And so if you have that lack of motion, and you're not going out to the end ranges of motion, this is why things like yoga are so valuable, then you're going to get an eventual breakdown of the cartilage in the joint. It's going to create inflammation because there's less blood flow. The cells, if cells even exist, are not able to get rid of their waste products as effectively. And so if you're not cracking joints that are immobile, then they're actually breaking down at a more rapid rate than the ones that are moving normally. So it's another one of those stories that we've been told that's actually the opposite of what we were told.
I know for my whole life that if I do some cracking and popping, I have a better range of motion and I feel looser and better. And also I think that that's why Qigong is such at least the Qigong practice that I learned, because I know there's a million different sets of movements and schools of thought, but as far as I can tell, the 12 movements that I incorporate into my daily life are basically moving every joint in my body across its whole range of motion in a gentle, easy way. So like move it or lose it. I think that's why I don't get like stiff or sore or stuck in my body so often, is because I just do this regular maintenance that doesn't take very long at all, where I move it all every day. And I'm glad that we're kind of getting into chiropractic, because I figured we might not just rehash the whole entire story of the Montgo elephant or what it might be. But, it's still something that there's aspects of that I'd like to talk about in particular, because you are a chiropractor. How did that apply to your analysis of that mountain and other structures as being an anatomy analysis? Like, was your chiropractic knowledge something that helped you have the eyes to see?
Oh, absolutely. If it hadn't been for that, I never would have noticed these things. It was essential. My brain just went in like 6 different directions at the same time.
All right. Good. That means it was a good question. Let's take it all.
Well, I was thinking about what you were saying before about the piezoelectric effect. I was thinking about limestone and what I learned about limestone that I never would have dreamed of. But just going back without, like you said, rehashing the whole story, which I've told many, many times now. In fact, the most recent video I posted on my channel was an interview with Understanding Conspiracy, guy named Paul Stobbs, and I go through visually a lot of the stuff we'll probably talk about in the rest of this conversation. But it was the trees that kind of first got me looking into the subject, and then I was watching a channel called Mud Fossil University. This guy Roger Spur for years has been talking about 1,000-mile long dragon in the Sahara that is in the process of devouring a fish that's also equally as large, not as long. And it seems like a crazy idea until you actually watch him go on Google Earth and start to go into these different structures in the Sahara Desert that appear to look like anatomy. And it's kind of a if you suspend judgment and you don't adhere to the mainstream cosmological model, religiously, then if you're open-minded, it's like, okay, well, why not? Maybe the universe is not what we thought. Maybe the Earth is much bigger. That would allow for that as a possibility. And then I watched a video by Jay Dreamers where he was talking about Roger's work, and he was showing different rock formations around the world that look like creatures. I think most of that stuff is pareidolia. They're not actually creatures, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Pareidolia is when you recognize a visual pattern that's not real. You see something, that looks like a face, or it looks like a creature, but it's just that you're looking at it from the right angle. Or the shadows are hitting it in just the right way to make it look like that.
It's also a really hard word to say. Pareidolia.
Pareidolia. Then there's another word that's similar called apophenia, which is the recognition that, or recognizing a pattern. Apophenia is basically the same as pareidolia, but it's recognizing a pattern that doesn't actually exist. And so I was already aware of these kinds of things before I ever started looking into the mountain, and knew that people can fool themselves when they see things and think that something is something that it isn't really. And when I started to look into the mountain with 10 years of university behind me, and essentially a medical degree, chiropractic is not medicine, but we study a lot of the same stuff for about the same amount of time. I wasn't eager to start talking publicly about something as crazy as, hey, that mountain over there might have once been a creature. It's loony, obviously. And so after getting exposed, and here I am launching into the story anyway, but after getting exposed to these ideas from Roger Spur, I've thought about this mountain that's literally in my backyard, and it looks like an elephant from multiple different angles, and people refer to it that way. And so going back to your question, instead of just jumping off the deep end. So
you're not the first person to even think it looked like an elephant. No.
In fact, there was a restaurant that was called The Elephant that had that as their logo. And the thing is, it looks like an elephant lying down from the side, and the head is tilted forward, and it slopes down where a trunk would be. There's a cave that is shaped just like an eye socket that is in the exact right place for it to be an eye socket. This where the head would meet the shoulders, whether it's an elephant or not, I don't know. You use the word pachyderm. That's a good word, because lots of different creatures have that kind of elephant snout, like an anteater, for example. So it doesn't have to be an elephant, but it looks like one. It could very well be, in my crazy world. And so just looking at it on Google Earth the first night that I started to ponder it as a possibility, it was never something that occurred to me. I'd been hiking it for 8 years, and I never once thought this used to be a creature. It's like, but after entertaining the idea, I thought I'll look on Google Earth, and after an hour, I had like 10 different anatomical features. That's already a big number, when you consider random chance. It's one thing for it to look a particular way from a certain angle. It's another thing to be able to look at it from lots of different angles and it still looks that way, and then starts to have specific anatomic features. And so I like to play games of chance, cards and backgammon, different things. And I was thinking about, what are the odds of these things? What are the odds that you would have two curves right where the head would meet the shoulders that you can see from above and from the side on the mountain? What are the odds of the eye being the shape it is, being exactly where it is? And I'd been up in this cave many times before that, and always puzzled over how the hell did this form? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And I knew the basics of geology, as far as Petra-Genesis. And I'm like, what's going on here? So going back to what you asked about the chiropractic, I decided to just look at it from a very analytical left brain perspective of, is this just a dumb idea, or is there something to it? So I got a laundry list of things that I would expect to find in the eye socket before ever going up there, and got out my anatomy books. And that wasn't enough for me because I have human anatomy books. So I started looking at different videos online and found like someone going with a video camera around an elephant skeleton, so I could see the skull from all kinds of different angles, and they kind of zoom in, and I can see that where the optic nerve would go. And vertebrates, all the head shapes change dramatically, but the eye sockets are made of the same 7 bones across most, at least the mammals. I'm not sure about, fish and other kinds of creatures, but the land walking animals and humans as well, we have 7 different bones that are making up the orbit, which is the eye socket. And those bones meet in certain places, and those are called sutures. So I had this list. I got out the anatomy books. I even found 3D anatomy rendering software so I could zoom in and look at it from the inside at different angles. And in the second video, I recommend people just, if they're going to go see the series that I did on this subject, it's called Unveiling a Titan. Skip the first video, because I would completely remake that if I were to do it again. I wouldn't use half the images that I use. And it was just an overview trying to present why I don't think this is a completely crazy idea. Looking at the history, looking at the mythology, which we touched on before. There are religious texts that I didn't know about from, apocryphal texts that were taken out of the Bible, the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch. They talk about the Titans. They talk about the giant trees. They talk about the angels cutting down the trees. There's all of these things from human history that seem to point at the idea that maybe this wasn't just a mythological fairy tale. And I lost the thread there, but so I had this list of things that I would expect to find, and I went up there. So, that's what I was saying. Just skip the first video, go to the second one, and you'll see everything that I'm describing. You'll see it with the 3D anatomy. You'll see with the elephant skull, and you can decide for yourself whether it looks like I'm just trying to make things fit into my crazy idea, or if it's like way, way too specific that there isn't something to this subject.
But Mike, I won't keep you any longer. This has been fun. I know we could just start opening up all kinds of further threads. We have so much overlapping interest. I loved this conversation. I appreciate the time. Are there any closing thoughts you want to give, or do you want to just go into your plugs where people can find your work, what you're excited about?
One thing that I started to say, and the reason I brought up Ben's channel, is because one of the articles that he showed was that they had found all kinds of different petrified coconuts. They found petrified heart. There's petrified gigantic creatures that they've found deep, deep underground. And there's a video that I did. I can't remember the title of the video, but it's all about geodes and different geological finds and how perfectly those line up with things that are created in the bodies, like kidney stones and liver stones and gallbladder stone. All the we make stones. Interesting, right? And if you do a cross section of those stones, they look exactly like geodes. Well, like a horse can have a stone that's this big, like the size of a baseball. They're called bezoars, and they're bizarre, right? But if you do a cross section of a bezoar, it looks exactly like a geode. So I think
allegedly a goat bezoar will cure all poison.
Really?
Alchemists thought that the bezoar was a panacea for poisons.
Interesting. Well, the Japanese or the Chinese revered a jade because they claimed that it was kidney and that it was great for. So if you have these elements that are in things before the world got toxified by all of our chemicals and everything, maybe those original, maybe if you pulverize this, it might be good for your heart. I have no idea, but it's
that would fit in the doctrine of signatures of things. At the very least, your work.
I almost mentioned that earlier. Yeah,
it points to the man being the measure of the universe, and the idea that the universe is a big man and humans are a small universe.
Yeah, the guys that had this laboratory that kind of came after me. One of the things that they brought up pareidolia, they brought up apophenia, they brought up the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like you think you know a lot about something when you really don't know much about anything. And they were accusing me of falling into these common pitfalls. And then they brought up the doctrine of signatures also, which it can simply be summarized by things look like things, right? There are flowers that look like monkeys, and there are stones that might look like hearts, but it doesn't mean it is a heart. right? And so this was what they were saying, is that I've fallen prey to these classic research mistakes, and they hadn't actually reviewed any of my research. They didn't really realize what I had already done, and that I had already addressed every one of the things that they brought up in their conversations when they were supposedly debunking me. I had already addressed in all of my videos. So that was why the rebuttal video took 3 hours, because there were 90 minutes of conversation, and I had to visually address every one of those points that were made throughout the course of those conversations. The video took me 6 weeks to make. It was a lot of work, but if you want to, it's very educational. People who have the time.
Well, since you got those big words, pareidolia and apophenia, let me give you one for the Dunning-Kruger idea. There's actually a word for it. Somebody who suffers from Dunning-Kruger is an ultra-crepidarian.
Ultra-crepidarian.
That's when you think you know something because you know a little bit, but actually the little bit that you know causes you to disregard the people that actually do know. It's the same idea.
Is this your creation, or is that an actual term?
It's a real word. My wife found it in a cool book she has of fancy ad hominems.
Ultra-crepidarian. Wow. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
a good one. I like that.
It's a 50-cent word.
Yeah, definitely. I'd pay $1 for that one.
I'll hear that in a future video of Stellium7, I'm sure.
You definitely will. It might even be the title of a video at some point.
Thanks for that, Jim.
Are you an ultra-crepidarian? Yeah.
Why I'm not an ultra-crepidarian.
Right.
Yeah, dude. Totally. It almost sounds like ultra creep.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's been fun to be here. I don't have anything to sell other than just go to the YouTube channel, Stellium7, and the live streams are some of my best work. They're long videos, but there's so many data points on all of these things: the trees, the heartstones, the mountain, and so much more, and instant petrification, and check it out. There's a lot to go through, and we've only scratched the surface of a ton of these subjects.
It was a totally wild whirlwind ride. I loved it. Thanks for coming on, man. And I hope we can do it again sometime. Take care.
Cool. Thanks for the invite. Take care, Chance. Bye, everybody.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to that excellent conversation with Stellium7, Mike Wilkerson. I always like Mike's, at least when I interview him. Mics that I've talked to on this show tend to have a lot of synchronicity, oomph behind their life and their exploration. So if you did enjoy our convo, go check out Stellium on YouTube, Stellium7. It's all visual, so you really do have to go watch. It gets almost exhaustive in the level of details that he's able to bring forward that support the argument that he's making. I don't even want to say he's making an argument. It's more like he's asking a question. Could it be? Could it be a giant pachyderm and not a mountain, a natural mountain? And what I liked about this talk is how we were able to go in depth about the very mainstream understanding that, hey, a lot of these rocks and a lot of this dirt was biological material. As somebody that thinks there wasn't ever an in the beginning moment and that it's always been here, it makes sense to me that we're just standing on top of the ancestors, standing on the shoulders of giants, literally. And who knows how far it goes down? Potentially an unknowable depth, right? It could just be an infinity we're looking at, or some kind of weird loop. I don't know. I also do enjoy the cosmic egg conversation about the growing earth. That could definitely be in the mix. So if you are new to the channel, or you've been here for a while and you're just thinking about maybe this is the time that I want to enjoy the full 2-hour conversation, you can get that at my Patreon or on my YouTube channel membership or Rockfin. I recommend the Patreon or the YouTube channel membership because those are the places that you also get my Inner World show with Dylan Sicosio, which has been on fire lately, going strong, 10 episodes deep. Really powerful stuff there. We don't do it on the Rockfin because I want it to be for people who actually specifically support me or specifically support Dylan. So that's the reason. And honestly, the functionality is going to be easier for you to access probably through YouTube or Patreon anyway. So it's a win-win. Now, what did we talk about in the second hour? Started continuing on about the contextual clues about the Montgo elephant and the mountain of coincidences around that, the many different either coincidences or pieces of evidence that support the theory that this is a giant petrified pachyderm. Then we talked about the myriad possibilities of how petrification can happen, the history of the geological materials, histology of the geological materials at Montgo. So lots about his pet project, if you want to call it that. We discussed the biological transmutation process, unrecognized by the science, but that there is reason to assert is going on. Biological transmutation, as in when animals are able to convert one type of periodic table of the element into another one in ways that just do not jive with the mainstream academic chemistry, physics, right? But that we watch it happen. So that was a fascinating part, that the body is the alchemical laboratory, essentially. We covered off some of the unanswered questions that need to be investigated if we are to decide that Mike's Montgo elephant is really a titanic animal. Also discussed the evidence for supergiant petrified trees and the petrified organs or heart stones that Mike has been finding. I asked him about if the rocks talk back, if he's got any kind of woo relationship with crystals and stones. We talked about the heart as a spiral vortex, not a pump, and finished off with talking about some of the many synchronicities that manifest in Mike's research journey. All around, it was a great second hour. Definitely worth the price of admission, plus you get all the archives. So what are you waiting for? Get in there, support me and my growing family, and enjoy the extension. Now, one thing that didn't even come up, we actually hung out for quite a while off the air after I finished recording. Always loved that, but also kind of wish I just kept it rolling. He started telling me about the book that he's finished writing and will be publishing one of these days, sooner or later, about that time he went to jail for being a hacker. And I was like, what? Not only that, but he's the first person to serve jail time for computer hacking. And no, he's not like a criminal mastermind or some kind of evil person, but he was a teenager and joyriding in the systems of various major corporations and got busted. Super interesting. I think there will be, you'll hear more about that from him as the book gets closer to release. He'll probably do interviews about it, but I thought that was cool. I had no idea until right at the end. And that definitely changed my perspective on what a wonderful weirdo Mike Wilkerson is. Chiropractor, titanologist, biogeologist, and ex-computer hacker, among many other hats I'm sure that he's worn in his life and could put on at will. Now, when we talk about the big questions of his argument, which, by the way, I'm not sold on, but I'm definitely not rejecting it either. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. It's compelling and it's fun to talk about, and it's fun to learn about the non-standard geology that we can infer from his research into this biogeology thing that he talks about. But the big thing that gets labeled on him usually is pareidolia, which is a kind of an aspersion, that's cast upon people who might otherwise be a bit of a synchromystic, right? You're seeing something that's not there. You grabbed your grilled cheese sandwich off of the skillet and, oh, it's the face of Jesus. So this is holy cheese. Don't eat it. Enshrine it. But I have more of an opinion that pareidolia is a superpower rather than a perceptual problem. It is something intrinsic to our natural perceptive capabilities when they're not filtered through restrictive belief systems that is part of what allowed philosophy to develop and for people to realize that man is the measure of the cosmos, that we are a little universe and the universe is a big man. So I actually don't consider it a detrimental thing if somebody's having pareidolia. I do think that it's worth keeping that idea in the forefront, but to look at it through a different lens of like, what if that's a power, not a problem? And then the other big question for me that comes up is like, where's the rest of them? If this is a giant titanic elephant, where's the rest of the elephants of that size? Why wouldn't there be more obvious evidence all around, right? You would think that. And I did catch Mike with that question, but it was for him, I think, also still a question. So we got to leave that chalked up to unanswered. But as I've had a few days since the talk to think about it, Could be that they're buried. Could be that things just didn't stay as all put together for most of these titanic animals. Or it could be that there were fewer. And that actually makes sense to me because we see the vast multiplicity and plurality of life in our current time. But what if in a age where things were bigger, they were also less numerous? And it was like there's still the same net amount of soul or biological mass in the realm, but that it's divided into fewer forms. That kind of makes sense to me because it's like division, right? You start with the one becomes two, becomes four or three or what have you, and you go on into further layers of division and multiplicity and smallness. That's maybe more just a logical take for me, but I don't know the answer to where's the rest of them. Could be something up with that. So interesting possible other material to look at from my archives. Go find episodes I've done with Matt Powers. Those are pretty good, where he talks about kind of like a Bio-Genesis thing that goes on with soil, where there's clearly more life to the dirt and to the rock than we maybe get told about by the mainstream, or that the mainstream is able to infer. Matt Powers is a permaculture guy. Check out episodes I've done with him. It kind of relates to this. It's not the same stuff, but I think it's like in the wheelhouse of cool context for what we just talked about with Mike. And now I think I'll play you guys out with a song by my buddy Dean, aka Lucid, because I play his music a lot in the outros. But what I found was a song that he did called Pachyderm. And I was like, oh, that's the one. I'm playing that one. But before I go, check the episode notes, show description, wherever you're listening or watching this, so that you can see the various ways to support me and InnerVerse with various affiliates like Typic New Herbs or Lotus Way, or become a master tuned human. I don't know why I'm saying you're a master, but like, join the ranks of my illustrious clientele who've done biofield tunings with me and see what it's all about. Get yourself into a greater degree of balance and see how that does bring a type of mastery to self and to life. Not mastery like enslaving, but, like artistic mastery over your free will expression, right? InnerVersePodcast.com/sound-healing. That's where you can find that. And before we go, I might be off the air for a little while. It all depends on how things line up, but I will be probably taking a bit of a break when our daughter arrives in the world. So for everybody that's catching this episode and wondering where I've been, I'll be back. If I don't have something between now and her birth, I will be back. Trust me. And I'll be back with dad strength, which I can't wait for. I love y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one. Don't forget to join our Telegram. We need more fresh blood in there. People to talk about the good gravy and have good vibes. All right. Merry Christmas to all. To all a good night.